One mistake you would warn new founders about when they are venturing into a D2C space today in India?
Don't chase vanity revenue.
And what's that one retention layer that's most underrated but works all the time?
Essentially, your cohort analysis and that cross marketing.
One thing customer cares about more than the brand realizes.
Speed of delivery. I think even brands realize it now.
I've seen there are a lot of shapewear, innerwear brands that are coming up who are focusing women specifically and teen girls. What do you think these brands are currently getting wrong?
When you look at teens from a fashion glamour perspective, it may grab you eyeballs. But at the end of the day, I'm a regular working woman.
Period panties, do they typically replace the traditional pads?
Honestly, it depends very highly on preference.
Which are those products that actually drives repeat business for Dijika?
Bras drive the highest repeat business.
What are like the core category apps that you use on the side?
We do use a couple of SEO AI training apps as well.
Hello, and welcome to the SASA podcast. This is Shopify Merchants Edition Season 1. I'm your host, Yuvraj Kivde, founder of thesasup.com, a platform that curates best Shopify apps for your business so you don't end up with random apps that don't work. On the show, we go behind the scenes with Shopify merchants and operators building real businesses. These are candid conversations with no fluff, no surface level stories, and a lot of practical lessons you can apply in your business. This episode is powered by BotSpace, AI Chat, and Helpdesk. Now, moving on. Innerwear is one of those categories where the product can look fine, but the experience can still be horrible. Wrong fit, constant adjusting, discomfort, and for teen girls, it's even more sensitive because their body is changing and most products are not designed for that today. Today's guest is Vani, who's a co-founder of a brand called Dichika, who's changing how you look at innerwear. Hi Vani, welcome to the show.
Hi, Yuvraj. Lovely to be here.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for coming here, Vani. So now, for people who don't know about Dichika or you, can you just quickly run down a 60-second version of what Dichika is all about, who it's aimed at, and what products do you sell?
Sure. So at Deetika Essentials, we sell functional, comfortable innerwear for women across age groups. And these are innerwear products designed for women by women. We've understood that for the longest time, innerwear has been made with the male gaze, where it was corsets or those underwire bras or push-up bras. So we wanted to change that narrative and make sure women feel as comfortable in their innerwear as men do in their gunjis. So
No, that's absolutely fantastic the way you guys are shaping the category. Now, what I believe is Dichika is built for teen girls and women's. That's a high trust category because comfort and fit decides everything, right? What is the wedge for the brand? If you had to boil it down to, would it be a fit confidence, comfort, beginner friendly product, period essentials, sizing support, or what's the core of the brand?
for us, it's comfort and repeat value. What we've understood about innerwear is that while most innerwear brands may market innerwear as a fashion product, it is not that. At
Right.
the end of the day, when I'm sitting in my innerwear, I don't want my mind space to be occupied by how uncomfortable I am, how my strap is itching, or if I'm feeling any discomfort. So that is the primary goal of innerwear, to be comfortable and to be something that a woman can pick up without thinking. And
Hmm.
that is where we come in. We brought in innerwear that eliminates the sizing parts. If you know about women's innerwear, they've also been picking up innerwear as per A, B, C, D, E cups, and underwire. What is your overbust? What is your underbust? In fact, sizing has been made so complicated for women; it's almost math, which it shouldn't be, right?
Right.
So that is what we are trying to do. We are trying to create a 360-degree stretch. We're trying to create silhouettes, and we have successfully created several, which are products that can be worn under your office wear, under your gym wear, and products that do not require you to think a lot. And we've created patterns where women feel comfortable, whether it's the elastic placement or the strap placement or the fabric used or the functionality that we offer. As women, we understand our own needs. So we know that at home, sometimes we don't like to wear bras. We prefer
Right.
lounging about. Older women, genuinely, as they age, they do not want to wear so many bras. So we've created padded camisoles or padded tank tops, which kind of are a mix between a bra and a camisole, which also keeps it comfortable. We've understood that women want a brand that they can go back to. At this point, if they want shapewear, there is one brand. There's period panty, there is one brand. And reusable period panties, as much as a part of her innerwear needs, as her bras or her camisoles. Just to put that up in period care products will not be correct, which is the apparel based product. So what done is we've created a bouquet of products which women can come back to. So out of the 20 innerwear that she may have in her wardrobe, 5 may be fancy, 15 has to be Deepika essentials, because we think about her comfort and we give her something for every functionality.
Got it. So that's basically like you're creating an entire range around whatever women's and teens wear on their day-to-day life,
Yeah,
right
and what
from comfort essentials to professional wear and everything.
correct. And all based on making sure they are comfortable and they do not have to think about what they're wearing. That doesn't occupy their mind space at all. We want to occupy the heart space, not the mind space.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Ani, I have a question again, not probably related to Deepika, but then off lately, I've seen there are a lot of shapewear, innerwear brands that are coming up who are focusing women specifically and teen girls. What do you think these brands are currently getting wrong? Because again, as you mentioned, everyone is positioning all of these shapewear or innerwear more as a fashion accessory instead of comfort angle, probably. What do you think these brands are getting it wrong?
I won't say what they're getting it wrong. What I can say is what they're missing out on. And I think when you look at teens from a fashion glamour perspective, it may grab you eyeballs. But at the end of the day, I'm a regular working woman. I am not really with my innerwear. Shapewear, it looks great on a model, it looks great on an influencer. What I'm concerned about at the end of the day is that it should not roll down if I'm wearing shapewear. I should not feel like my breath is restricted. Those are the things that we tend to focus on. And the other thing is that every brand has their own journey, their own ambition, their own ideas on how they want to promote the product. We want to focus on the repeat value of it. We want to make sure that when a woman buys a shapewear, then she doesn't have to go anywhere else to buy a bra, because we want to be a part of her entire innerwear journey. And we want to create a customer basket that she can keep coming back to, because she has trust in the brand that what she's going to get from us is comfort. What she's going to get from us is something that is made for her body. We don't make shapewear that is so restrictive that we are not telling her that your body has to look like this. Your body will look how it is. It will just give you a smoother finish.
Hmm.
And we are focusing on more of that acceptance and understanding that however you choose to dress up, you should feel comfortable in that. And you should be able to
Got
come back to us for the next functionality that you need in your wardrobe. You don't have to go looking here and there for multiple brands. And we are also making sure that we are doing products as per your sizing. A lot of brands are importing from China, right? Importing, just trading products. We are creating
right.
product based on Indian body types. We've done research, we've studied some 3,000 Indian body types, created our own size chart. So customers will come back to us and sometimes, oh, this is not standard. We say yes, because standard is what you've been following, is made for Western bodies, or not made for your bodies. India hasn't had a size chart that has been made for Indian bodies. And that is something the government is also now working on, that, we need a size chart made for us. And that is why we say, look at the size chart, go with the basic sizing that we're giving, and we've achieved a 95% fit rate. Only 5% exchange request we end up getting by eliminating A, B, C, D cups, by eliminating all of this, by making sizing simple, and by sticking to Indian body types.
No, I think that's absolutely brilliant because India is such a diverse country. We have varied size of body sizes, right? And if you go through the traditional lens, it can't be small, large, medium, or XL
Even they say
because
pear shape, hourglass. Sometimes Indian bodies are a mix of those. We don't have that typical pear and hourglass so many times.
exactly. No, I think that's really important because for a brand who's into innerwear and shapewear category, I think wrong size is probably is one of the most important factors of returns or exchanges.
Absolutely. So innerwear, we focus on innerwear. We have two SKUs of shapewear. The idea of making a bouquet is that whatever you need in your wardrobe, you can come back to us. So we're very, very focused on that comfort innerwear part of it. And lower innerwear, of course, is non-returnable for hygiene reasons. But even the complaints in innerwear will come for fit reasons only. And for women, understanding the fit has also been a challenge. I know women who reach their 40s without truly knowing what their bra size is. They've been wearing wrong size their entire lives because nobody's helped them even understand it, or it has been made so complicated that they've always been confused which cup size they should be wearing in which brand.
Got it. Do you think it has to do about the moral values or the kind of culture that we grew up in, that things like innerwear, talking about period or menstruation has always been a taboo and a hush-hush subject, that people are not discussing about it?
It's not just our culture, world over. Do you know when the first sports bra was made? Think about it. 1970s. Women were forced into corsets since the Victorian ages, and the first time somebody actually made a sports bra, which is a comfortable garment, and women were participating in sports before that, right? You know, they had to wear the busty women had to wear tutu bras sometimes just to support themselves. Because innerwear has for so long been made with the male gaze. Even when new brands have come in, it's always been a certain pattern for innerwear made for women. In fact, when we used to go out with our patterns and our size when we started out, and the entire innerwear industry, the carigars, the manufacturers, we were told by the men, Madam, aapko nahi pata. And like, this is made for us. How do I not know it? But that is the kind of arrogance, the kind of know it all attitude that has been there. We went to shops when we were doing our research, to mom and pop shops. And we asked them, यही size होगा आपका मैडम आप देखो आपको आएगा. Where is my question? There's no trial room. There's a guy telling me this is my size and this is it. If I pretended to go shop for my daughter, and I was like, मैडम लड़कियों के लिए यही आता है, छोटा साइज कौन लड़कियों के लिए अलग से थोड़ी बनता है अभी. That is the kind of attitude that prevails in the society. So that's the mindset shift that we are trying to break. That problem hasn't happened for men, right? Men's innerwear is a far more consolidated market that women's innerwear is.
Right.
Why? It is, and even though a lot of shoppers for men are still women, a lot of men still don't shop for their undergarments themselves. It's the wives who are still buying for them. Yet it's a more organized market because they focused on the comfort of men.
Hmm.
But what about focusing on the comfort of women? That is something that really we focus more on the fashion for women, more on the look for it, the pop colors, beautiful models. When you look at the advertisement, the ads also, that's what we are focusing on. Even when you're talking about size variants, we're still doing those airbrushed models. We're still talking about how good it looks. Not
Right.
doesn't matter how comfortable it makes me feel, how it is
Yeah.
made for me. Why are we not talking about that? That's the mindset shift that you're talking about.
Got it. When you create ads, are you guys running ads?
Yeah, lots of them.
Okay. So I mean, since you mentioned, everyone is talking about how beautiful the innerwear is gonna look, how pop out the colors are gonna look. How do you actually show how comfortable it's gonna look? Because again, it's again a challenge to shoot a video, and again, maybe there would be some restrictions if you're running it on Meta or Google or any other ad spaces. How are you currently portraying that Deepika is comfort first
We've
and not?
taken sexy out the picture as far as innerwear is concerned. Our creators are everyday girls. We tell them no to please don't use filters. We try to make sure that we pick up creators with different accents. We are not sure that this has to be a polished accent or has to be a AI voiceover. No. We tell them to do voiceovers in however they speak. We try to do vernacular content. We worked on
Hmm.
that. And we make sure that they speak about how the comfort aspect of the product. Our product is also something that we offer very high coverage products as well because we also understand we cater to the mass market. My average customer is a working class girl, is a middle class girl who typically in her everyday life dresses modestly. She goes to work, she goes to college, that's her everyday wear. So products are also high coverage. And a lot of influencers are comfortable wearing that. Of course, lower innerwear garments you don't ask the influencers to wear, but there are different ways of shooting it. Where you show her comfort, for example, period panties. We have ways of shooting showing how much it absorbs. And we let girls talk about the experiences in the innerwear. Like somebody went on a holiday and she carried our tank tops and she was super comfortable. It was a beach holiday. She didn't want to carry too many clothes, didn't want it very heavy. And she carried it and she was able to pair it up with multiple products. She wasn't feeling hot. That's what we encourage our influencers, our UGC creators to talk about. The experience with the product, the comfort with it, how they were able to use it, the utility of the product.
Got it. Now, coming from the operator perspective, what are like the three numbers you track on a weekly basis that tells you that the business is running healthy?
So obviously your The basic three numbers would, of course, be your conversion, your traffic, and your repeat. How many customers are coming back? And we try to make sure that, and we track that repeat on a weekly basis. And what are the customers coming back for? Because we know certain product categories that we have are high customer acquisition categories. They are categories that drive a lot of curiosity. Some category shapewear is really trending, so that category drives curiosity and customer acquisition. Period panties drives a lot of curiosity, so customers will come and buy it once. But these are not categories that will have a high repeat. You bought a shapewear once, you're not going to buy it every 3 months. Na ek baar kharida 2 saal tak chal
Yes.
jata hai. Period panty, by the very nature of the product, if it's living up to its claims, a customer should not come back to me before 2 years. If they're coming back to me before 2 years, then my product has failed. So then we track that somebody who's bought what is the next product that they are buying. That metric is very important to us. So how much of the her wardrobe are we occupying now?
Got it. So it's now moved from how many products you bought to the wardrobe percentage.
How much share do we have in her wardrobe now? If she's bought 8 period panties, is she buying the camisole from us? Is she buying the bra from us next? So that is what we track.
Got it. You mentioned that someone would buy shapewear once, they would buy period panties one because you have a 2 year kind of guarantee or warranty on that. What is that
The
category and
warranty,
what are
that's how
those
much the
products that
product
are
should
actually
last. If it is as per lab test, that is how
okay?
much the product should last, ideally.
Got it. Okay. So that's how much the product should last. So again, these are like very rarely people will buy. These are like acquisition kind of models which drives curiosity. But which are those products that actually drives repeat business for Dejika?
Bra, camisoles, panties, seamless panties. Bras drive the highest repeat business because bras is something you need your 4 basic colors for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And those 4 basic colors, because you're washing and wearing and there's a drying time involved, you need at least 2 to 3 in each color. And then because you're washing them every day, 6 to 8 months, typically women tend to replace the bras. And then bras, you need different functionalities. You need a tube bra, you need a sports bra, you need a thin strap one, you need those one of those regular V-shaped ones, you need without hook ones, you may need something with hook. So that is the highest repeat category. Then there are camisoles, which also work as a decent repeat. So camisoles, again, typically 4 colors, but camisoles you would end up needing new ones in 9 to 10 months time. And
Okay.
period panties, of course. So typically, what you would need is 3 to 4 period panties, which should last you for 2 years. If you bought two and you like the product, you may come back for two more, but that's it. And then period panties can become a referral based business where you like the product so much, you refer it to a friend. If you like the product so much, you would ideally come back and buy the next one for me, which is a higher repeat product for me.
Got it.
Cotton
I'm
panties are
actually
very
curious
high repeat
around.
as well.
Got it. I'm curious around the period panties. And the reason I'll tell you why. I was working with another brand. They are a US based brand. They sell period panties. And since then, I have been curious, but I didn't had a direct connect to talk to anyone who owns that category. So, period panties, do they typically replace the traditional pads which women's wear, or do they still have to wear it?
So honestly, it depends very highly on preference and on usage. So period panties, at least our brand and a lot of other brands in the market, are designed to replace pads. Now, what happens is, and I'll be very honest here, whether it is pads, it is cups, any period product, there will be a slight chance of leakage because of how you worn it, right? How your
Correct.
flow is, how the fit is. The pad also, even with wings, there have been cases people have said, "Oh, my pad leaked." Why? It was wings, it was all properly attached. But sometimes it can move. Period cups also, you don't know how you placed it. Sometimes it does move. There are certain problems and it has leaked. People have had those problems. And for some people, they find their fit in the first go. And then they know that their period panties are not going to leak. So we have all those kinds of customers. We have young girls who are only using period panties and not using pads. It also depends on at what stage of life you've started using them. So let's say you've never used sanitary napkins, you're just a first time user, and you started off with period panties, you may end up using only period panties. You're a
Okay.
user who's like an adopter who's transitioning. You might use a combination of a sanitary napkin and period panty on your first day, then start using period panties by the second or third day. Let's say you're a
Hmm.
woman who's nearing menopause and the flow is not either very regular, and it is lesser flow. So we have women like that also using only period panties. But so with this kind of flow, I'm not worried about leakage at all.
Makes
So
sense.
depends pretty much on how, everybody's comfort zone. But period panties are essentially for everybody depending on how you want to use them. They are meant to be used without sanitary napkins. but would very much depend on your flow, your body type, how's the fit for you.
Got
So
it.
all those factors are important.
Great. Thanks a lot for answering that. I was kind of, again, I want to be very honest. I thought about almost 30 minutes whether I should even ask this question or
Go
not.
first.
On to go on podcast. So yeah, I think yeah, we still have that mental stigma where we are not comfortable or open talking about things like this. Say
You
again,
know
say
how
yeah.
many boys work in our warehouse and how comfortable they are mentioning period panty and flow and bra and fan. You have to see how comfortable our boys are. Using the words, there's no taboo left for the now organized. We have warehouse boys, pickers, packers, we have laborers. For them, it's an everyday thing. So I think we've lost that discomfort completely. Our boys don't, they are, for them, it is a regular product like a ganji or an underwear. They talk about it in the same manner.
Got it. No, I think yeah, it needs to be normalized even in households. Definitely for sure. Now
It
coming
is.
back.
We have so many fathers shopping for the products. On customer care, sometimes queries are from men, from fathers who shop for products.
Oh, nice.
For their daughters, they pick up period panties. There's a lot of change that is actually happening on the ground, which needs to start reflecting more and more because we have those shoppers now.
Nice. Great. Great. Now, coming back to the growth engine, what channel is actually driving a lot of results for you today or growth for you today for DJK?
See, Meta, obviously, that is but essentially everything is Meta, right? WhatsApp is Meta, Instagram, Facebook. Those are the discovery channels that we have in India right now. So there is Google as well, but Google is something that we're still sort of experimenting with, still trying to find our feet on Google. But Meta does bring a lot of revenue for us. The mites, like the largest source of our revenue and the largest bucket of spend for us.
Got it. Do you also work with marketplaces, influencers, quick
Yeah,
commerce?
yeah, of course we do. So quick, so 50 to 55% of our revenue is driven by our own D2C channel, which is of course fueled by Meta primarily and organic content, but all the organic content also goes on Meta platforms only, whether it's WhatsApp,
Right.
Instagram, or Facebook. And then we are on marketplaces. Amazon is a great revenue driver for us. Amazon does well because Amazon is a platform that is built for essentials. And it's a very high intent kind of a platform where people go search for the product and buy it. It's not so much of a browsing experience. And our product is a very high intent based product. So Amazon does very well for us. And quick commerce also has picked up phenomenally because quick commerce has specific use cases that work very well for our products. So, and it also acts a great discovery platform. Quick commerce, we typically, on website, there are value packs. Quick commerce is a single SKU. So people who discover the product from quick commerce often come back to our platform to buy the product again.
Got it. That's really interesting. Uh, I want to ask you about quick commerce, but I'll park that for later. What's like a healthy CAC for a category like yours today?
So more than CAC, I'll talk about the ROAS because at the end of the day, that is what will matter eventually because the ROAS will also factor in the repeat that you have. Because in a way, our logistics costs are not very high. The product does not have a very high volumetric weight and returns are very low. It's a very high intent purchase anyway. First, for lower innerwear garments, returns are not accepted. For upper innerwear garments, we do an exchange only. But even with that, because it's such a high intent purchase, if the fit is right, we barely have any customer will come and say, I don't want it. They bought it because they wanted it. So for us, a
Exactly.
ROAS of 3 works very, very well. So, and that I think most innerwear brands are targeting that. I know for fashion and everything, ROAS of 6, 7 is like the holy grail, which is where people want to reach. But it's also because those are higher ASP products. Those are more of your, impulse buys also. There is a lot of discovery involved. So there are greater number of RTOs, there are greater return requests, more fit issues. So you have to build in all of that. We know what all we don't have to build in. So 3 is a good number.
Correct. And for someone who's operating in the D2C space, where do you think most of the funnel leaks today for most of the brands? Is it basically click to PDP, PDP to add to cart to checkout completion, or prepaid versus COD? What all things actually breaks the funnel or leaks it?
I think it would depend differently at there is no one set place where it would leak at. For example, in our case, it used to be so you need to keep fixing those things, and also it needs to keep evolving. For example, when we started out, our prepaid to COD was we had 25% prepaid and 75% COD. Now we have 80% prepaid and 20% COD. So we fixed that. That was the first part that we had to fix. And till March, we had a good conversion the entire month. Our cart to checkout was also pretty good. Where we were losing customers were in before one, like the product before the cart, right? They would come and there was a bounce. Uh, Now in April, for example, we figured out that our cart to checkout really fell. Our add to cart was high, so all of that was working, but the cart to checkout fell. So there are different things that you need to understand. What is it that's not working for the customer anymore? If there is some seasonality to it, it's the kind of products that you're offering. It's the kind of deals that sometimes you're offering, or the incentive that you're giving to the customer to check out. Because there is so much of an information overload that it has to be very quick. Then you're also the speed of the vessel. It would also depend sometimes. Let's say if your checkout speed is slow, not everything would be fine, but that one little piece would suddenly make people drop out from the funnel. So I wouldn't say there's just this one metric or this one particular way that the funnel leaks. It could be different for different D2C brands. It could be different in different months. So you need to just keep following the customer where they are going and figuring out what went wrong or what is not working out for the customer.
Got it. Now it's literally been, I think, close to 2 years you guys featured on Shark Tank. So I won't go too deep into it, like how was it and all of that good stuff. I think we all know it and might have heard somewhere or the other side. But I think most people don't talk about what breaks after you go on Shark Tank. Everything talks about the rosy things like, oh, traffic surged, we got a lot of orders placed, and everything, but no one talks about what actually went wrong. Like you might not have the right inventory in place. There might be uh, traffic issues with the site performance. You might not probably have the right attributions in place and all the good stuff. Customer support tickets might rise and all of that. What actually went wrong with DChica, or did you? I mean, instead of saying wrong, what was your experience? Like, what do you think if you could go back 2 years ago before the episode aired? What would have you done differently to further utilize all of that traffic or all of that eyeballs you got?
Would have definitely worked more on the website, got a better sort of team. We have a great team now, but at that time would have gotten a better team on board to make sure we maximize the impact of Shark Tank. Having said that, for every brand or every kind of product, Shark Tank traffic may not necessarily result in sales immediately. For example, a food product or something like, a cleaning product, which is that, let's say if you're looking at it, let's say I'm a viewer and a food product comes in. I might have an impulse to, check it out. Oh, this looks interesting. But if an innerwear product is coming and I don't need anything at that point of time, I might go, but I may not buy at that point of time. So for
Right.
every brand to just track their success of Shark Tank in the basis of immediate sales is not always correct. For us, for example, they were not immediate sales, but what really worked for us for Shark Tank is a boost in that recall value. We started seeing better conversions. The first metric that we saw rise up was my conversion on marketplaces went up. Website traffic, of
Okay.
course, went up. We got access to better data, more customer data. But what didn't happen was it did not drive immediate sales. What it did do was that now I know that these customers I can market to, they're interested in the product. The timing may not be right now. So that's something that we figured out. And those are the things that for every category it works differently. And also how your episode is aired, how much. So Shark Tank is also end of the day, it's a TV show, right? It has to be a story. Sometimes what part of your
Yeah.
story has been focused on? Did your product even get focused on Shark Tank? If not, if the story was something else which was focused on, then that's what you have to learn from it. That, okay, this is the part of my story that resonated. Now this is what I need to use to eventually build more product awareness.
Hmm.
For us, it was the outspokenness. It was that got highlighted. And it worked. It may not have worked immediately for sales, but it worked great for us to build the brand later. We are now known for talking about things without a taboo. We're known for taking an unfiltered approach, for being honest. And that really worked out well for us. And Shark Tank just helped us build that brand value across. So however it does,
You
whatever the content, that you don't have control over the content, but you do have control over your narrative that you can build with whatever content did get shared on Shark Tank. That is the control that you can still exercise.
Apart from the visibility, do sharks add actual tangible value when they invest in a company? Like, do they get involved in day to days? Do they
No, no, not
guide
day
you
to day.
way?
It's up to you. You ask for guidance, you get it. But it's not a very day to day basis. It's not operational at all. It's more of a larger picture sort of a thing. Or if you need advice, you need a connect for that. It doesn't happen on a day to day set.
Got it. Got it. So when you guys aired, when you said you didn't get orders right away, but when you started getting orders, you might have received a huge spike of them. Uh, with orders, I think support tickets also becomes a huge challenge,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
a ton of support ticket comes in. How are you guys equipped back then? How were you handling support back then?
So CRM has been a challenge. We have been constantly, and the kind of support tickets that come in, they keep increasing. For example, after Shark Tank, uh, we had a lot of men saw it, and they saw it's an innerwear brand. You suddenly started getting calls on the customer support number, which were not very appropriate calls. So we shut that down, and we started to move to WhatsApp and written communication only. We would always have callback options for customers. Now, over the years, as the website scale, the D2C scale has really risen, and we're doing about 500 orders a day sometimes. So when you do that on the D2C channel, then of course there are a lot of customer. Then you have a different sort of customer care that you have to handle. Their product inquiries, then their exchange inquiries. So with all of that, we do have to equip ourselves, and we are working constantly. So now we are evaluating more and more AI tools, but we've also understood how the customer looks at AI. The customer knows this is AI for sure. There is in the Indian market, there's still that thing, no, I want to talk to a human. So
Yeah.
that is something that we're learning to evolve to help the customer understand or make the AI sort of more perceptive and more understanding to the customer needs so that the customer's problems as much as possible are solved before human intervention is required. So those are the CRM challenges because at the end of the day, the Indian customer is also extremely impatient. They're messaging you during non-working hours. Let's say at 7:30 p.m. You don't respond. By
What the
morning,
news to
there is 7:30 p.m. It's written work hours are till 6. By 9 a.m. in the morning, you would be called a fraud brand, a scam brand. Your customer care support doesn't answer. So for that, you do need AI. You do need a non-human to kind of handle and tell them, okay, these are the working hours. We will get back to you because the patience levels are very, very thin.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then since you brought up, I think there needs to be a right balance between AI plus human, and I think that's where our today's sponsor, BotSpace AI Chat and Help Desk, comes into picture. They can seamlessly help you tackle both the AI side of it, plus whenever required, pass on the conversation
We
to
are
the human
working with
side.
Botcase right now. We are trying to develop solutions with them. So
Oh, that's crazy.
yeah,
Kind of like a serendipitous
yeah.
thing for us. Awesome. Now, I want to now go into quick commerce. I recently talked to someone. I'll not name them yet. The episode hasn't gone live, but they do mention that typically every D2C brand today want to get on quick commerce, but people should be cautious when you are trying to go on the quick commerce route because there is a dark side attached to it. There are delayed payments, extended credit periods. Then, the moment your product doesn't get sold, they push you to run ads on their platform. And even after doing all of that, if the product is not getting out of stock, they then also ask you to take the product back. And then at the end of the financial year, you might have already said, hey, I've already generated X amount of revenue from quick commerce because that's order placed. But when you try to do your accounting, you then have all of these back orders coming in because no one purchased it. And I think that's typically is happening in the vicious cycle because the moment a quick commerce platform knows that you are going to air on Shark Tank or you're going to run some big campaign, they place a huge order because they want to earn the share of it. What was your experience around quick commerce, and what would be those two, three things you would caution D2C brands before getting themselves involved into the quick commerce category?
So we learned our very hard lesson from our offline foray. We before quick commerce, we did venture offline through the GD model. And learned the hard lesson that SOR sales is not equal to sales. Any product that has not been bought and paid for is not sale. So when we started quick commerce, we were very careful about how much to give, and we spent 1 year on SOR with quick commerce, trying to understand the model. What will work,
Can
what will
can you
not work.
what exactly is SOR?
SOR is stock on return. right? Which you said that you've
Okay.
sold the product. So now you think, okay, I've got that order, that purchase orders there, I sold the product. But the purchase order for, let's say, 100 units. I've sold 100 units to the quick commerce platform. The customer has not bought 100 units. The customer
Got
has
it.
bought
Yes.
10
Yes.
units only. So for me, the sale is 10 units, not 100 units. That 90 units is essentially treated as a stock transfer, which is what it's a working capital lock for me. That is how we viewed quick commerce from day one, that it's a working capital lock. How much are we willing to lock? And what is the cycle that the working capital is getting locked in? What SKUs are getting locked in? So we started off very slow with quick commerce. We tried to understand what SKUs are working. We did not fulfill POs blindly. Even if quick commerce would give us a huge PO, we would not fulfill it. We would do our own study. We would understand how much of it is working, and only then we would fulfill it. We ran ads in the beginning, and we ran aggressive ads in the beginning to understand if the product had enough visibility, will it sell? Once we understood that, we scaled down on the advertising instead of pushing advertising even more. Because at the end of the day, advertising has to be only on SKUs that work well, and you should have enough working capital to fund it. So that's
Absolutely.
what we did for a year. Now we are doing more of an outright model on quick commerce. So which is what we report as sales. So whatever is bought outright is what we report as sales. And we try to make sure that any new SKUs that we do, if we are launching, if they get launched on SOR, then it is done after a lot of study on what is working, how many SKUs. We don't start off very big. We start off smaller in a smaller kind of area. Understand how it is working, because quick commerce also does not give you access to a lot of data. You will get data of the state and the city, but dark store wise data nahi milta hai quick commerce pe. And there's always a lag. So only thing that you can do is based on estimates. So then it would mean a lot of kind of crunching and also customer behavior from your own D2C channel. What colors are getting sold? Which markets are those colors getting sold in? What sizes are getting sold? For example, Blinkit
Right.
charges you a listing fee for every size. So if I have a clothing brand, I
Oh,
have 4 sizes, then I have to list all 4 sizes and pay for all 4 sizes separately a listing fee. Then use that for the ad fee. That's extremely expensive. So then what you would do is you would understand that which size is getting picked up the most, and that is the size that you list on quick commerce. And that acts as your discovery kind of a funnel also, where customers explore that size and then they want to come back and explore more product. So which size and which category. So quick commerce has to be a very, very careful expansion. Just because you've got a big quick commerce PO.
got it. No, I think it's very important to be cautious because I am in a couple of D2C brands group, and every alternate day, brands are just asking, "Hey, I want to get listed on quick commerce. Can you please tell me who's the right contact, how to go about it, and so on." So I think it's really important. People should know and get themselves educated. Maybe talk to brands who already have listed themselves on quick commerce platform. Understand the pros and cons. I think quick commerce probably might not work for every brand and every category. Uh, and then they should be just cautious about going through all of these cycles. And as you mentioned, just getting the PO doesn't mean the product is sold. You don't get the money right then and there. So there is a lot of capital that you have to keep invested. So again, depends on how much capital you are
How
willing to
much
go ahead.
working capital you're willing to invest. Also, it may work for almost every category, but there would be certain SKUs that will work because they have quick commerce is a very use case sort of a basis. No, ऐसा नहीं है quick
Right.
commerce ने PS भी बेचा है. It's not that, I mean, they weren't able to sell PlayStations, right? They sold
Right.
clothes also. But it has to be, so again, for every brand, it will be a journey, and how much of your, so you have to make sure that whatever stock that you're selling to quick commerce is an investment that you're doing. That's your working capital lock. So how much of it you're willing to do is something that you need to take a call on, and which SKUs is something that you can do your research on and list only those in the beginning. See how that works, and only then add. So you cannot go mad aggressive about scale. I know that's what we are told in the startup, that there's this FOMO that you don't do it, somebody else will do it. We're all rushing against time. And we
Right.
made that mistake and we've learned from it. That sometimes slow is all right. After that you can scale up, but at least understand before this going all in.
Got it. Now let's talk about your tech stack. What platform are you using for your website right now?
We use Shopify.
Why Shopify?
The simplest one to use, most of the apps are compatible. It has a very easy drag and drop interface, so your team doesn't have to be trained extensively. You need one AMC, you need limited tech, and it's easier to manage. So, obviously, that is why. And the platform is great. It's very compatible with almost everything. Works well. It's a fast platform. So, for all of those reasons, it's one of the simplest platforms to use right now.
Absolutely. I've been in the ecosystem for almost a decade, and I think of all the e-com platform that I've worked with, I personally found Shopify to be one of the most simplest, effective, and the most scalable one because the App Store offers you a ton of plug and play apps, which you then don't have to do everything custom coded on the website. So I think
In the
that's
end, it is that simplicity that matters. You need to make sure that it is simple.
got it. Got it. Perfect. Do you know what theme do you use and how customized the theme is?
That I would have to come back on because it's the developers. I don't get so much into which theme they're using. If I locked it in, let me see. I would have it here
Okay.
because we
And
did
then
change
coming
the theme some time back.
Okay, okay. Coming to your app stack, again, you don't have to name the apps because again, your team might be working on it. But what are like the core category apps that you use on the site?
So we use an app for managing our exchanges because you wanted to, so whatever can be automated to the maximum extent. We do that.
Hmm.
So there is an app that we use for exchanges. There is an app that we use to make sure variations are shown in place when a customer looks at a particular product and all the color options that are there in the product are in place. And we do use a couple of SEO AI training apps as well.
Got it. Awesome, awesome. Do you also use something for analytics apart from the
Yes, we do. Yeah,
default
there's
Shopify
a
analytics?
yes, yes. We do use an app for Shopify Analytics. Do you want me to name the apps or I mean I can also, I don't have a
Yeah, yeah,
problem.
yeah,
For
please.
example, we use Kui for
Yeah,
example
yeah, go ahead.
for analytics, yeah.
Okay,
And it gives us a lot of insight on the how much is the user spending, which how much time on which page, which is a high intent buyer, low intent buyer. It helps us kind of nudge the buyers towards the checkout, nudge them towards prepaid. So yeah, we do use the analytics app as well.
got it. Now we are coming towards the end of our conversation today. And then this is the last segment, which I call a quick fire round. I have a couple of questions for you ready with me. You just have to answer the first thing that comes to your mind. And again, if you need more time, definitely think about it and give you the answer. Ready?
So yeah,
Okay. What do you think the one thing that you got right when you started Dichika?
the market, the TAM.
Okay. One mistake you would warn new founders about when they are venturing into a D2C space today in India.
Don't chase vanity revenue method.
Perfect. Your best growth channel today.
Our own D2C website, Meta.
Okay. What creative angle has consistently worked for your ads?
Honesty, being absolutely authentic and honest. If the product hasn't worked, there's something wrong with the product, we go around and say that this was what we found, wasn't working with the product, this is how we fixed it.
Okay. And what's that one retention layer that's most underrated but works all the time?
Essentially, your cohort analysis and that cross marketing. That I mean, a lot of people do it, but you have to have the right kind of product portfolio also for it. So perhaps underrated like that because if you don't have the portfolio, then it doesn't really work. So that cross marketing to different cohorts.
Okay. One thing customer cares about more than the brand realizes.
Speed of delivery. I think even brands realize it now. But that's the challenge. I think more than brands realizing it, brands being capable of doing it because the benchmarks have been set very high by quick commerce and the likes of Amazon. And D2C brands which are still trying to make it, it's very tough to match those speeds, those kind of logistics. That the customer but really cares about these. How fast you're getting the product to them.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Vani. This has been an amazing conversation. Before we wrap it up, any 2 cents you would like to maybe say to your customers or maybe fellow D2C founders?
Customers, I would love to say that please have some empathy. They're humans sitting who are managing your customer care queries. We understand the expectation of speed, but please also understand that when you're dealing with D2C brands directly, they're not the Amazons and Mintras and Zeptos or Blinkits of this world. Have that empathy, have that understanding. And to fellow D2C founders, as I said, that we each have our own journey. All of us trying to be rabbits is not going to work. And sometimes, you have to kind of figure out your own pace of the race.
Awesome. And guys, that's a wrap. Before we wind up the episode, a quick shout out to today's sponsor, BotSpace AI Chat and Help Desk. Most shoppers today don't buy on the very first visit. It usually takes them 5 to 6 visits before they decide, and in between those visits, they have questions, they abandon cart, and leave the brand. BotSpace's AI agent answers question on your website and Instagram instantly. Then they can also follow up via WhatsApp or automated voice calls to recover cart. It also automates support tasks like order updates, returns, FAQs, so your customer gets 24/7 help without adding workload. If you're a Shopify brand looking to increase conversions, try BotSpace today. For our viewers, you also get 1 year of AI agents completely free. Details about all of the offer and the Shopify app is in the show notes. Vani, thanks a lot again for this awesome conversation, for being open, honest, and sharing all the details. And for anyone listening and building a Shopify brand, the takeaway is simple. Innerwear, you're not only selling design, you're selling comfort, fit, confidence, and trust. And when a spike hits, like Shark Tank or quick commerce visibility, your system decides whether you keep customers or lose them. If you enjoyed the episode, do subscribe to the SaaSup podcast. And if you're looking for the right tech stack, do visit thesasup.com and get the right app stack for your business. This is Yuvraj signing off.